Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our fourth BC Poultry Symposium. We're coming to you from Abbotsford, British Columbia, where it's a little chilly, a little snowy. We're located about, I'm saying this, we're located about an hour east of Richmond, British Columbia. And our guest speaker today is coming from Richmond, Virginia. So we come from a similar name area. I want to ask you to look at and thank our sponsors. They're listed prior to the meeting and after the meeting and also on the website. And Jess McCoy, without further ado, thank you again. Your enthusiasm on your topic is extraordinary and we really appreciate it. And we look forward to you coming up and visiting and drinking what we make out of water here in British Columbia. So without further ado, Jess, it's all yours.
Dr. Ritchie, thank you for having me. Obviously, it's a pleasure to be able to do this. I wish that we could be in person. I miss seeing everybody's faces. I miss having those interactions kind of after the show. Obviously, if you enjoy this, if you enjoyed last week, this will be a continuation of that. You will recognize some slides. You will also see some new things about how to actually apply interventions into water today. And you will see some similar slides than you saw before. I'm going to do a quick recap, but let's get down into it, shall we? So, just like last time, who's this guy? Why do I care whether I run long, right? I don't run long. I am trying very hard. As Dr. Ritchie said, I'm from Richmond, Virginia. That is in the southern United States, which means I talk fast and I have an accent. I'm doing my very best not to have either of those things today. If I lose myself in this, I'm sorry. But if you can give me 3 slides, you can do whatever you want after that. It's not a joke. I recognize I am a giant water geek. Some people aren't. If you don't have questions at the end, we'll finish early. This is a little bit longer than last time's. But we'll still have time for questions. A little bit about me. This is off the front porch of the house I grew up in the Shenandoah Valley. That's in Virginia in the United States. That's the Eastern Seaboard. I swore I wasn't going to work in the poultry industry because you can see some barns in the background here. What you don't see is the other 14 that are next to it. And then with nothing else to do, I started working in the engineering, regulatory, and wastewater division of a local integrator. And now I focus on disease control for all species, but I cut my teeth and my heart is still in poultry. So why do we care, right? We care because an egg is 74% water, a bird is 2/3 water, and manure is 30%. Why do you care about that? Because all of that water comes through the drinker line. They get a little bit from respiration, a tiny bit from feed, but water is the largest oral input for that bird. It's the single thing that they intake through their mouth more than anything else. And it's a key nutritional biosecurity component. We talked about that last time. If you need to see the last video from this, I know that BCPS has it up on their website. Thank you all for doing that. But what that really means is half of your end product is water. And you'll find today that when I feel like things are important, I say them more than once. So half of your end product is water. And that means half your pay is water. Over half of your pay is water. Because if you're watching this, you're likely in the poultry industry. You likely are selling eggs or selling meat or selling manure. And that means that over half the money that you're putting into your truck, putting into your car, paying for the Wi-Fi bill that you're using, the clothes that you're wearing, your kids' college savings fund is coming from water. If you're uninterested from here on out, I totally understand. Feel free to check Instagram or Facebook or Twitter. If you are interested from here on out, we're going to talk about how to look at water more closely and how to do practical interventions. So what does that mean? We're going to talk about the options that you have for water treatment. how to apply them safely, because we're dealing with industrial chemicals, and how to apply them easily. And I think that's really the piece that I want to highlight. Everybody thinks that water treatment needs to be some very expensive, elaborate piece of equipment. And what I'm going to show you today is it doesn't need to be, okay? My goal is to give you about half the information on the products and the applications that they have. I'm not going to use brands. I'm only going to talk about chemistries. If you want to know more about a specific piece that we talk about, please submit a question and we'll talk through it. If you have questions that you don't want to ask during this, my contact info will be at the end of it. Please reach out to me. This is not designed to give you all the information and have you run out and put a water treatment system in. This is designed to get you thinking about what's going to work at your facility and how do we match the chemistry and the application to that. Just like last time, what's good water? All these things we talked about before. I'm going to go through this quickly so that I stay on time. But what I want to remember is these are birds, not people. We're talking about a business. We need a return on investment. So we need to determine which of these make sense and how we make more money from them. What do we care about? Biology, minerals, and pH. In the last section, we talked about what those did and why and how to identify them. Today, we're going to talk about how to fix them. So, biology. If you're going to eliminate pathogens, you have to sanitize or disinfect. I'm not going to read these to you. You can see on the left side of your screen, these are all the options that exist that kill biology. The reason that's good is because running biology on birds is a bad idea, right? If it's not a probiotic, then it is going to make that immune system function. If it makes that immune system function, then those calories don't go to building protein or eggs, which is what we want to have happen, okay? Reducing disease reduces medication costs. By reducing pathogenic biology going into these birds, we're improving our return on investment from them. We're getting more efficient. But I think the key is we need to run a residual disinfectant. And so you'll notice that options list gets smaller. The reason we care about that is because I don't care how good the water is before it gets to that bird. We care what the bird is drinking, right? We're dealing with open drinker systems. You've got a standpipe on the end of that line, and there's a ball in there that you may or may not be able to see depending on how old and dirty your water is, that moves up and down as the birds drink. Go in there and watch. Those lines breathe, right? They're pushing air out, they're bringing air in. That's why that ball moves up and down. And that means that the environmental pathogens can get back into that system, right? We have birds on litter. We call it litter because you cannot sell it in the newspaper with what we all actually call it at home, right? And those particles are moved throughout that barn with the giant jet engine fans that we have on the back of new barns. And as we're pulling that air in and out, we're pulling those pathogens back and forth, right? So we want to make sure we use a chemistry that gives us disinfection past the point of injection. And there are your options. What pathogens? These are the ones I find the most fun. In case you're curious, that's COVID-19 on the right. I felt like at Zoom University, I needed to at least recognize COVID's impact on us doing this today. But these are the pathogens of consequence that we are finding on poultry barns in water samples that we take that can impact your production. Now, there's obviously more than this that we find, but these are the fun ones. I put Aeromonas on there because for any veterinarians or super geeks about water quality like me, finding a pathogen as unique as Aeromonas is always a fun thing for me. And so we actually found that on a poultry barn. For everybody that's not a super geek, that's a very resistant to antibiotic disease that we have found. Why do we care about that? Because there's a drinker in the middle of this picture and all those birds are drinking out of it, right? So we want to do our best to reduce that bird-to-bird transmission that we're going to have in the barn, or wildlife-to-bird transmission if we're talking about using surface water from outside. But we're also talking about reducing labor because we don't have buildup on drinkers. We don't need to go clean them every other day. right? Or once a flock, if we're really being honest, right? We're killing those things that are going to grow inside of there. So we're reducing the amount of time that you have to spend dealing with your water system. I'm going to go through the most popular options now. The first, generic bleach jug, right? I think everybody in the poultry industry at some point has run bleach and citric acid on their birds. If you haven't, you're a unicorn at this point. What I think is important is that it does have a relatively quick kill time. It is relatively stable, and you can buy bleach for $4 a gallon at your local hardware store or grocery store, right? But one of the things I really want to highlight when we look at chlorine disinfection as a whole, and whether that's gas or whether that's a solid or a liquid, you know, all of those bleach chemistries, is that we're starting to see chlorine resistant pathogens. Now, this is a list that continues to grow. As I think about it, I know I need to add on here a new disease that we're dealing with in the US and hospitals. That'd be Legionella. But I've highlighted some in here that I think are important and matter to you, right? The biggest is probably Clostridium, right? And what I want to point out is you can Google right now and say, does bleach kill Clostridium perfringens? And the answer you'll get is yes, at 100 parts per million. So these are the diseases and pathogens that at levels that won't also kill your birds will not be killed by chlorine bleach type disinfection. So that's gas, that's solids, that's liquids, right? And so to me, we have moved past being able to use chlorine because now we're talking about pathogens that we care about, that are novel. We're not talking about trying to kill fecal coliform, right? We've got a salmonella on here now that's chlorine resistant. You see Campylobacter, which I think is going to become our next pathogen of consequence. So I think we're moving past what bleach can do for us. But I also want to remind you that if you're going to use chlorine, you need to get the pH level down because that affects contact time. So with chlorine and bleaches as a whole, we need to think more than just, do I have enough bleach, right? We need to start thinking about, do I have the contact time necessary? Do I have the volume of residual in there necessary? And then palatability issues above 10 parts per million, we see birds typically back off water in those levels. Which leads us to chlorine dioxide. I will admit to you right now, I have my flag firmly planted in the chlorine dioxide camp. I like this chemistry. It kills those things on that list I showed at levels that it does not kill birds. And to me, what's really important is the taste and odor control claim. If you want more water into these birds, you're going to get more feed into those birds, right? Because water intake is the limiting factor of feed intake. The problem with chlorine dioxide is it's new, you generate it on site. It's not something we're comfortable with really as an industry at this point, but we're getting there. Chlorine dioxide is rapidly becoming the water disinfectant of choice for poultry. And that's because of the data that we're getting off of trials on what it can do for production. But I think the most important to remember is you're not buying chlorine dioxide in a jug. You are generating it on site. And we're looking at levels at 1 part per million if we're comparing disinfection, 3 to 5 for palatability. There's really good data out of North Carolina State on what chlorine dioxide does for palatability, and that taste and odor control claim works. Lastly, I'm going to talk about peroxide. What about peroxide? It's a really good oxidant. It kills absolutely everything on the planet if you put enough of it in there and you give it enough time. The problem with peroxide is that it takes a little bit longer to work. You got some safety factors in there and higher concentrations. And you'll notice I've talked through what's good and what's bad, right? We need to determine what works at your facility. But the things to remember on peroxide is if you have a lot of metals, you've got to account for those when you size your pump. And you're looking for 30 to 50 parts per million of residual instead of 3 to 5 on the other two. So you're using 10 times the amount of chemistry. Does it work? Absolutely. We've got it, you know, we see it on some farms still to this day. There are some farms though that have converted to a different chemistry. just on cost. But peroxide absolutely works if you use it the correct way. I am going to hit organic acids because I know that organic acids are in vogue right now for poultry. What's good about them? We have used organic acids for disinfection for millennia. That's how we make pickles. It's how we make yogurt. It's how we make cheese. You know, it's all of these different acidified foods from cultures. Almost all of them are using organic acids to extend the shelf life. The problem with organic acids, it is not a dose response equation. I can't tell you put 5 parts per million in and it works, because it's not about how many parts per million you have. It's about what pH level you have for which acid you're using. So citric acid is different than acetic acid, is different than propionic. So they're a little bit more finicky. And if you have a lot of minerals in your water, you may never get to the point where an organic acid works, but it's an option for water disinfection. Typically, we're looking for pHs below 4.5. And depending on which acid you use and how much that takes, you actually may have some palatability issues. How do we determine if your disinfection is working, right? We've used a disinfectant. We want to make sure it works. I'm big on making sure that we have proof that what we're doing is working. We can use chemical strips or titration. I put ORP on here because especially with chlorine, we look at ORP levels and a lot of people say 650 to 750 and you're fine. I think it's important to mention that ORP is merely your ability to oxidize, not disinfection. So, you know, I could run sulfuric acid and 0.5 part per million of bleach and get you an ORP of 800, but you're not going to kill anything. You don't have enough bleach. And on the flip side, you know, you could run 10 parts per million of bleach or 20 parts per million of bleach, get a 1000 ORP, but if your pH level is 8.5 and you don't have an hour of contact time, you're not actually disinfecting. So while ORP will tell you the chemical is there, it's not necessarily telling you if you achieve disinfection. For disinfection, we're looking at Petri films or ATP analyzers. You're really looking for the biology. And typically that takes a while. You know, for a Petri film or a plate, you're talking about overnight. For an ATP reader, you're talking about less than a minute, but it's only telling you ATP. So it's not going to tell you what you're growing, merely if you're growing something. I'm going to go into solids quickly. Again, I'm going to try to keep us on time because I know how this one's going to go. I see this picture and I see water lines with pictures that look just like this everywhere I go. And the reason is because, especially in North America, we don't build barns where we have good water because we build houses there instead. And so we typically have solids issues when we're using well water and sometimes even with surface water. And so we need to take care of those issues because this restricts water flow. So what do? We filter it. It's all about contact time and surface area. I recognize there are chemicals out there that people will tell you, put this in your water and you don't have to worry about solids. There is not a magic chemical that makes iron disappear. Iron as a chemistry is a metal. It is not a gas, okay? It cannot disappear. All you're doing is holding it in solution and then running that extra solid into your bird. And you have the nutritional impacts that can come with that. If you want to pull solids out, you've got to filter them. If you're not going to use a filter, your drinkers are going to filter it for you. Your cool cells are going to filter it for you. For anybody that's got solids in your water, you're nodding your head right now because you know at the end of a cool cell season, you're pulling flaky solids off the outside of that cool cell, right? So we've got to determine our water usage per minute. If I asked you right now, how much water do you use? You'd probably tell me 2,000 gallons a day per barn. That's pretty standard. But we need to determine what you're using per minute. And so the way I get that is I take your gallons per day. The data out there says you'll use about 40% of that water in the first 3 hours. You divide that out, you get your gallons per minute. And then I add 10% as a safety factor, just in case. You want to over-engineer your filtration, not under-engineer. Typically, we see usages on small birds up to 5 gallons a minute. On larger birds, which is what we're processing a lot more now, you're getting 10 to 15 gallons per minute, depending on how many birds you have in the barn. And the reason that matters is because everybody has one of these, right? Maybe 2 of them. Maybe you even have a filter in it today. And if it's one of the clear ones, maybe you can even see through it today. But if I was a betting man, I would say that more than half of you can't. And at least 10% of you don't even have a filter in there because it clogs up so fast. And those that do probably have a 20-liter bucket sitting in the corner full of rusty old cotton wound filters. The problem is these are rated for 2 gallons a minute at 100 gallons a day with 50% efficiency, which means after the first 20 minutes of when those lights come on, that filter's full and you're bypassing water around it. So you're not really filtering with these. You have the impression of filtration. This is what an actual filter looks like. They do 100 gallons a minute at 90% efficiency. For everybody that's ever thought about a stacked media filter, that's the secret ingredients inside of them. They backwash themselves. The one on the left is a larger cartridge. There's 180 cotton wound filters inside of that pleated filter. That's the surface area. They both do the same thing. One you clean yourself, the other cleans itself. So if you don't have time to clean a filter, get a stacked media. If you do, use some elbow grease, save some money on a larger cartridge. But you want to make sure it has an O-ring seal on it. That means you're not going to get water bypass. The problem with that is that means when that filter's full, you don't have water anymore. So you need to stay on top of it. Some other solids that we deal with, calcium, magnesium, the hardness minerals. The problem with those are not necessarily that the minerals are bad. It's twofold. Number one, you have maintenance issues that come with it. And number two, it's one of the few things that you can see. And so as a producer, you walk in and you say, oh, this looks terrible. If this was my shower at home, I would buy the CLR product, which I see when I used to go in hotels all the time at like 2 o'clock in the morning, the CLR commercial comes on, right? And you feel compelled to want to clean it up because you want to provide these birds with good water. And everything is that, soap scum and mineral scale in your shower's bad. It must be bad inside the barn too. We're building bone structure. I'm not worried about running too much calcium or magnesium on your birds. What I am worried about is your lines clogging up. And so the options that you have for treatment there are reverse osmosis, which is expensive and inefficient. You got to put twice as much water in for the water you get out, and then you've got the other half of the water you have to deal with. Water softeners, which is merely a trade of calcium for sodium or a different mineral if you're using potassium chloride, right? But you're adding twice the amount of sodium in there as the calcium that you pull out. Everybody that has birds on here that's had a hot load of feed on sodium knows you're going to get some pretty loose birds on that. Anytime I see a water softener inside of a barn going to the birds, I unplug it because I'm not worried about the calcium, right? But we can also use pH reduction in this case. And if you remember the last time we talked about pH levels and what those minerals mean and how we can use that to our advantage, this is where really analyzing your water quality results will tell you if we can utilize pH to keep those minerals in solution. So to pH above 7, calcium, magnesium, they fall out, they become insoluble, they build up on the inside of your water line. At a pH level between 7 and 5.5, you don't get any buildup, they stay in solution. And then at a pH level below 5.5, that is the chemical definition of descaling. So if you want to take some of that buildup out of those lines that you have already, you need to go ahead and descale and get that pH down below 5.5. How do you prove efficacy with solids? I carry around a little test kit with me. This is a picture of the solids tester that I have. I'm positive the batteries are dead in it because, frankly, I look at the drinkers. If they have that white scale on them, I know it's probably calcium. If there's a water softener before it, I know it's probably sodium. The easiest way to determine that is Take a pocket knife, scrape it off, taste it. If it tastes salty, it's sodium. If it doesn't, it's calcium. Okay. But those drinkers will tell you, do you need to descale or not? Do you need to start chasing solids or not? If you've got that slimy, rust-colored stuff on the outside, then you've got iron and iron bacteria. What you're really looking for is if it's slimy, if it's slick, that's biology. If it's chalky, if it's powdery, that's just the mineral. And that'll help you determine what you need to do to make sure you keep those water lines and those drinkers clean. A pH we talked about previously, we typically say 6.5, maybe 6.0. I've got some people going all the way down into the 4s. What pH level is important to you depends on what are you trying to get out of your water treatment system. All right, if your pH is above 7, no matter what, I'm going to tell you to add an acid. Which acid? Totally depends on what's in your water. But the reason for that is improving palatability, improving consumption, improving conversion, reducing disease. There is a ton of data from a ton of researchers. I've done 3 publications I can think of myself on what acids do to improve performance of birds. And that's really where we start talking about pH and how to improve performance on your farm with pH. Which acids do we use? Well, if you're going for the organic, it's everything you find on the outside of a Coke bottle, right? They make things taste good, but they don't do great with high mineral contents, okay? Which shifts us then to the mineral acids. These are all the things you're going to find at your local hardware store to clean your concrete. Why does it clean concrete? Because it etches the top layer of those minerals. That's what we wanted to do in this water as well, right? Hold those minerals in solution. They work great with buffering capacity. They're really good at boosting disinfection. Remember, we talked about disinfection for chlorine chemistries, the pH level being important. They generate chlorine dioxide great. If you get down into the 2s, you can disinfect with them, but you're probably going to violate your warranty if you do that on your drinker lines. But this is really where assessing what your water quality coming in will tell you what options you have for adjusting pH afterwards. How do you prove it? I carry this pH meter with me everywhere I go. This pH meter is less than $100. Okay, that's Canadian or American. It is not an expensive pH meter. However, I bought a $10 case to carry it in. It doesn't ride in the glove box. It doesn't sit under the pickup seat. It doesn't rattle around in the vet box, right? I've carried this meter for 6 years at this point. The reason I replaced it after the first 8 years is I gave it to a customer. If you take care of a pH meter, especially this one, because you can re-wet the bulb, I don't have to worry about any special dilutions or diluents or anything like that. It will take care of you. There's no reason to spend a lot of money on a pH meter that's probably going to roll off a file cabinet if you don't have it in a case. So buy a cheap pH meter, put it in a case. The reason I'm saying a meter instead of traditional pH strips is if we ever talk and I ask you what your pH level is, you're going to say, well, it's pinkish. I'm like, okay, is that 6.8? Is that 5.5? Right? But if you have a meter and I ask you what your pH level is, you're going to give me a number, right? And so we're both going to be working on the same thing. If we look at the same pH strip, we're probably going to say 2 different numbers. And for some reason, the poultry industry has a lot of colorblind people. And so at that point, it really makes a whole lot more sense to have a pH meter than to use strips. Now we're going to talk about how to easily apply these chemistries. Okay, you'll notice again, not products, chemistries. Okay, I have to tell you legally, always adhere to the manufacturer's instructions. And now that I've done that, I can tell you how to actually do it. But you want to use the proper pump, and you want to use, if you're going to use a stock solution, you want to keep it clean. This bucket is one of my favorite pictures, not my absolute favorite, but it's in the top 5. This is a stock bucket on a poultry barn on the eastern shore of the United States, where we have a more dense poultry population than anywhere else in the world. Now, I am sure for all of you that are in Canada and watching in Canada, you would never let a bucket get this dirty. But in the United States, we do. And my problem with this is there is nothing you can put in that bucket that's going to help your birds, because everything left over in it is going to make them sick. You can see the two different colors on it. That means we have biology. You can see that there's iron in there, so it's going to bind with anything that we put in it, right? It's, if we use the disinfectant, it's going to use up all the disinfectant. If we used an antibiotic, we're going to have all kinds of interactions with that molecule based on this bucket. Please stop taking the clean buckets home. And for everybody, I know that I can't look around an audience right now. I know half of you are laughing because you know you took the clean bucket home. Admit it to yourself, you needed a clean bucket at home. Okay. If you have to take the clean bucket at home, put a trash bag in this bucket. This bucket can be as dirty as you want it to be. You can put a 13-gallon kitchen trash bag in there, and all of a sudden it becomes clean, right? Keep that stock container clean, because if you don't, you're just inoculating your birds with whatever's in there. I have another picture of a stock bucket with a dead mouse floating on the top of it, right? There's no way we're improving the health of those birds with a dead mouse floating on top of the bucket we're running water quality into, right? So let's all come to an agreement here that we're going to keep stock buckets clean from here on out. Rinse that thing out with water, flip it upside down, put a lid on it, keep that clean. If it gets dirty, wash it, take it home, right? Put a clean bucket. We all know that these 20-liter buckets are a dime a dozen on a farm. Let's keep one nice one, please, underneath your medicator. So the metering pumps that are out there, you're going to hear me talk about two different types of pumps. There are metering pumps and there are proportioners. The one on the left is a diaphragm pump. The one in the middle is peristaltic. The one on the right is a piston. They all work by getting a signal from a meter or a timer or some other type of measurement device and telling it to run. This is what we want to do water treatment with, okay? We do not want to use proportioners, right? If you are, please use a diaphragm pump, not a piston pump. Take that away for today. But the key is keeping them running. Like every piece of equipment on a poultry facility, it's going to break. It's inside an ante room that is dirty, right? So what do? Jesse's theory of maintenance, I have made this up, that all pumps have three basic sections: a motor, a pump, and a check valve. When you need to do maintenance, please replace the whole section, not just the single O-ring that has failed today that you have caught, right? Because all the rest of the O-rings inside of that section are getting ready to break as well, and you're going to have to fix it again a week from now, right? So buy the whole section, replace the whole section. Motor, pump, check valve. Motor, pump, check valve. Those are the three different sections of every applicator on the market. When you do maintenance, and if you're not doing maintenance, then they're disposable. But when you do maintenance, please service the entire section. It will make things repeatable for you. When you're picking out a pump, remember we talked about gallons per minute for our solids. The same holds true for proportioners, okay? Did you know there's more than one dosatron? I used to work for a distributor, and we would have people call in and say, I need a new medicator. Okay, which one? The blue one. Every medicator is blue. Every single one of them, not just dosatrons. Every medicator is blue, okay? And we would say, all right, dosatron, sure. Which one? The same one I bought last time. If you've been buying that 7-gallon-a-minute medicator and you run 10 gallons a minute, you're water restricting your birds every time you do an application. So if you're running an antibiotic and you need to get it in them quickly, you're never going to get it in past what the max flow rate is. If you're running electrolytes on your birds in the summer because you need to keep them hydrated, and you're running them through a smaller unit, you're water starving those birds when you want them to drink more, and you can't figure out why the birds at the end of the barn are all dying. If you have mortality or morbidity at the end of your drinker lines, start checking flow rates and then start looking at your equipment to see where do you have the restriction, right? And that is going to help you keep birds alive longer because you're going to get the right amount of water to them. So again, I believe in saying important things twice. Metering pumps are when you're looking for a level of chemistry, part per million level or pH level. Medicators are when you're looking for a dosage, grams per pound of animal or ounces per gallon. When we do water treatment, we want to use metering pumps because we care about the parts per million, not the dosage rate. I already have a medicator. Show of hands. I know I can't see you, but in the back of your head, do you have a graduated cylinder on your farm? I just did this slide less than an hour ago for another group of people, and I have had 4 people in my entire career, which is over 20 years at this point, which is a scary thing to think. I've had 4 people say yes. And out of thousands upon thousands of people, I will say that last year at BCPS, 1 person in the crowd became my 4th. So one of you, if you're still on here, congratulations, you're still number 4. That means I've gone an entire year doing virtual presentations to more people, I think, this year than I ever have because of COVID. I still don't have another one, okay? We in the United States cut the top off of a 20-liter Mountain Dew bottle. If you're in Virginia, if you're in Texas, it's Dr. Pepper. If you're in the Midwest, they call it pop, and they're weird. So we cut that off. We say that 16 ounces is close enough, right? But stick with me on this. If you assume that a properly measured stock solution takes 5 minutes to create, that means that you have already measured in liters the side of your bucket that you're putting it in. And I'm sure that all of you have already done that. And we assume that you have 2 stock tanks per farm because you got 2 barns at least. That's 10 minutes a day. I'll give you 2 weeks off because you're a farmer. That's 351 days. That's 3,510 minutes. That's 58 and a half hours a year. What is a week's worth of time worth for you, right? It's called a medicator for a reason. Spend that week's worth of wages on a metering pump, okay? I already have 1 pump. I don't want 2. Why is there a piece of cardboard on this drum? I took this on a farm I was very upset that someone walked me into because they were dropping pH and running bleach at the same time, and that piece of cardboard on there was the only thing between me and chlorine gas that would have killed me very quickly, okay? We're using industrial chemicals in an industrial way, right? That's the only way we make them make sense. We're using higher concentrations. They gas off. We're using chemicals made to kill biology. People are made of biology. I grew up checking chickens when I was 10 years old. I never want somebody's 10-year-old kid to walk into this ante room and have that piece of cardboard not be there. Please, 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 please use the right applicator. Okay, this is what it looks like. We've got a metering pump hooked to a well switch injected before the pressure tank. The pressure tank regulates our flow. We know that every liter of water going through there is getting the same amount of treatment, which means every liter of water going out looks the same. Repeatable success. Okay, here's another one. Water flow meter. Every liter of water that goes through there triggers those pumps to run a specific amount, so every liter of water going out is treated the same way. What's different about those two? You never touch the chemical. You don't make a stock solution. You don't have the ability to off gas. You don't have exposure to that chemistry, okay? I don't want you to be exposed to that chemistry. You need a gas mask to be exposed to that chemistry, right? Let's do it the right way. Spend the money that we're already saving by not having to mix a stock solution and apply it correctly. This is what it looks like. This is by far the cleanest ante room I've ever seen, which is why I have a picture of it. And you're probably looking at it going, boy, that's clean, right? Metering pumps on the side, running our water treatment that's underneath this table so that we don't run into it. Medicator pumps that have been used, cleaned, and then isolated off, a water filter. It doesn't have to look this pretty, but it should be something similar to this. Okay, line buildup. My favorite picture of all time, that is like 10 centimeters of E. coli. Can't figure out why the birds are all getting loose when we move them into the barn. What I want you to take away from this is that the first drink that bird gets is the worst drink. We've heated up the barn. We've got water that hasn't moved as we've cleaned and gotten ready for our next flock. It's full of manure that we've pulled in from the air, and it's just sitting there. It is exactly how we create Dr. Ritchie's favorite drink out of water. We ferment biology. It creates what we want out of it, right? And then the bird drinks it first thing it goes in. It's the worst drink they're going to get in their life. Let's clean those water lines. This will have the largest impact of anything that you can do inside of your barn is cleaning water lines in between flocks. Okay, what works? Peracetic acid, silver stabilized peroxide, and perquat, and as a rule, 3%. Okay, how do we get those higher concentrations? We can use a sump pump and fill it directly from a larger container. Mixing stations, just like you see on your power washer, or that's an adjustable proportioner that will go up to 3%. But we've got to get that rate in there to be effective. What's not on that list? Your traditional medicator. If you're trying to clean water lines through a medicator, you're not getting the right level in there. Okay. And all of you are thinking, I'm never cleaning my water lines, it's going to clog them. Well, with what? If you're worried about cleaning your water lines because you are afraid to clog your drinkers, you've already admitted to yourself you have a problem. Clog them with the junk that's inside my water lines. All right, let's clean it out. Let's pick the right chemistry that will actually work and get it out, right? On the left, that's a perquat. On the right, that's peracetic. At the bottom, that's silver stabilized peroxide, okay? Choose the one that you think is going to help you clean that water line and come out, right? How do you do it? Use the right amount, typically 3%. You do the little things, right? The water supply line is from the well to the beak. Go in and trigger those nipples. When QuickBait used to have that great little half lid, put those drinkers at hip height, fill the lines, trigger them with that QuickBait lid, feeder lid, you know, whatever you've got there. Broomstick. I've seen guys use 2x4s before, right? You want to get that cleaner all the way past the metering pin and the drinker, and then flush it out with treated water, right? You've cleaned all that biology out. Let's make sure we put disinfected water back in there so that we don't grow more. Flush those lines, trigger the nipples again. If you've got bell drinkers, lift them up, make sure you get water flow and go from there. But I want my takeaway message to be use the products that suit the situation, right? Talk to whoever you need to talk to about this is what my water looks like. This is what I'm trying to accomplish. Pick the chemistry that suits the situation because there's not a black box that's on the wall that treats everything. That doesn't exist. I wish it did. If it did, I'd be coming from the Caribbean during COVID as opposed to Richmond, Virginia during COVID because my job would be easy, right? I'd just say, buy this. It's not that way. And make sure you apply it correctly, apply it safely, apply it easily. Those things are available and they're not expensive. Water treatment doesn't have to be the cost that most people think. And continue to get educated, right? In 10 years, we're going to have new chemistries. In 5 years, we're going to have new applicators, right? As we continue to grow and evolve as an industry, we're going to update what our best management practices are. I think BCPS, I put it on here. I think these webinars are fantastic. I think it's a great way to get that information out to the industry. I know that we've had people from more than just Canada here. I can't thank you guys enough for doing this, and reach out to those resources, right? They're veterinarians, consultants, subject matter experts. Talk to your sales rep. If your sales rep can't answer that question, get the manufacturer on the phone. If they can't answer it, you probably shouldn't be running that product, right? There are tons of resources out there for you. Seek them out, find them, and I think you'll get the answers you're looking for. I want to thank you again for having me. I'm going to switch into the Q&A section and go through this, and we'll see what questions you have. If you have questions, please go ahead and ask them. Let's see what we've got. What do I think about RO? Do I think it's a good way to enhance water quality? I think RO, while the water coming out of it is inherently better than what goes in, there are a couple things that RO does not do for us. RO water does not disinfect. In fact, if you go swab RO systems, you'll find that most of your biology grows there. It's made to pull minerals out. It's not made to keep biology from growing. So I think RO can be part of a water treatment system, but it is not water treatment on its own. I personally have recommended a reverse osmosis system twice in my life out of the tens of thousands of treatment systems I've consulted on. I just rarely see it worth the money. They're expensive. And then you have this water you have to do something with. In the United States, we are legally required to treat the water that comes out of an RO system that we don't use. I'm not sure what the regulations in Canada are, but I'm guessing they're very similar. But even if they're not, if you've got 2,000 gallons of water going into the birds, you got 2,000 gallons of water full of all kinds of minerals you have to get rid of now. So like, can they be effective? Yes. Do I personally like them? For your farm, I'd need to see your water quality before we put one in for me to say yes or no, this will work. But if you have high sodium or something like that, it's the only way to get it out. Next question, chlorine dioxide for layers. Can I mix vaccine in the water line? Any unexpected reaction? If you are using a vaccine stabilizer and the legal limit of chlorine dioxide, which is 10 parts per million. So if you're at 10 parts per million or under, that vaccine stabilizer, if it carries sodium thiosulfate in it, and they all do, unless you're using powdered milk, as long as you put that stabilizer in before you put the vaccine in, I don't see any unexpected reactions, but I have to legally say, talk to your vaccine manufacturer about it. But sodium thiosulfate, which is found in essentially all stabilizers on the market, will remove chlorine dioxide as well as chlorine. It will not remove peroxide. Okay. Next question. I have Pseudomonas and E. coli in my water. pH is 8. Sodium around 25. Been struggling with issues. Recipe for my issue. Get your pH down and use a disinfectant that we know kills Pseudomonas, which is not bleach, right? We know that Pseudomonas won't kill bleach at the right level. I'm not worried about your sodium levels. Your Pseudomonas is what I really want to focus on. If we kill that Pseudomonas, we'll kill everything else. The answer there is probably chlorine dioxide or peroxide. To determine which one of those is, I see that the next part of your question is, how do you contact me further? jmccoy@neogen.com. Dr. Ritchie's got my contact info. I know that Val's on here. She's got my contact info. Reach out to them. Shoot me an email. I think my contact info is probably going to be part of what gets put up on the website for this. So I'm happy to talk to you about it. But we really need to know what else is in there besides just your biology to determine the right way to go after it. The tools mentioned in the talk. It depends on which one you're talking about. If you're talking about pH meters and that type of thing, Amazon. Your local animal health distributor. I know Dr. Ritchie has access to all of these things. Your resources are there. Again, I'll say if you have trouble finding anything, feel free to reach out to me and I'll put you in touch with whoever you need to get in touch with. Next question. RWA broilers, I'm assuming raised without antibiotics. You add copper sulfate, acid, vitamins, oregano. How do I know it's too much before it's too much for the birds? Talk to your veterinarian and your nutritionist, okay? They're working off of research that's been done in the field about what levels make sense and which ones don't. So whoever your nutritionist is, whoever your veterinarian is, reach out to them about, this is what I'm adding, this is my program, and have them explain, you know, whoever gave you that program, or if you came up with it, right, which is fine. This is your intent. This is where you're trying to get. Is what I'm running going to accomplish that goal, or do I need to tweak something in there? Again, I think this is a great time to say the resources are there, seek them out. The next question is, do I have experience with a powdered chlorine dioxide and then a powdered acid? You know who you are if you asked it. I'm leaving the brands out. You can't get success for more than 2 layer cycles. The reasons for failure. My first question would be, are you cleaning your water lines in between flocks? I know for layers, you're talking about a much longer life cycle. So you may need to look at doing some water line cleaning while birds are in the barn. You can do that. You pick the right product at the right rate, and we can get that done. Those 2 chemistries as a whole, I see a lot of people be successful with. I think we'd have to determine, what you mean by unsuccessful after your 2 layer cycles. Does that mean the birds aren't laying? Does it mean you have high mortality? That type of thing. And so yeah, we'd really need to understand what your measure of success is. But I think that there's no reason those chemistries don't work if you do everything with them. Next question. Perhaps your plumber's not your best source to get advice on water. What specialist do you seek out? I'm a water on chickens guy, right? I think the biggest difference between, in the US, we have the Culligan man, right? That guy focuses on people, and it's great, but people need different water than animals, right? And different animals, like the layer question versus a broiler, there are 2 different end water qualities that we're looking for there. Because on your layers, you want to hit standard, and you want them to lay eggs that are the size that you make the most money on. On broilers, you want to put as much weight on that bird as efficiently as you can. You're not trying to hit a standard like you are for layers, right? And depending on what type of layer program you have, you might be doing, off days of feed or something like that. I highly suggest you seek someone out that specializes in water for birds. You're more than welcome to contact me. I'm happy to talk to you about it. Dr. Ritchie, he and I stay together a lot on what's going on. So whoever you seek out, the information's available, but really I would look at someone that focuses on water for animals as opposed to water for people. Funny thing, for people, we don't want to gain weight, right? Where on animals, we typically want them to gain weight. Let's see, and in the chat, Waterline using their product off label between flocks when birds are in the barn. As far as labeling goes, I legally am required to tell you to follow the label, right? There are plenty of products out there that will be effective at descaling and disinfecting and cleaning that line while birds are in the barn on label. The one thing that I'm very passionate about is I think it's really important that we follow regulations, right? If we don't and we have a recall, not only does that affect your personal facility, but it affects our industry as a whole. If one person gets caught using a non-registered disinfectant or something like that, the media gets a hold of it and all of us suffer. So I think it's really important that as an industry, we have this social contract of I'll do things right at my farm, you do things right at yours, and we'll both be sustainable and profitable from that. I also think that we all know that there are people that object to what we do for a living. And they might wear leather shoes and don't see the irony in that, but they don't want us to continue to be able to raise birds for food. And any chance they get to shine a poor light on our industry, and it happened last week in the New York Times, I got sent that article, they will do that. And they're doing it to try to open people's eyes about what poultry production looks like. I personally think that if we continue to be transparent, and this is what it really looks like, I think Dr. Ritchie, with all of his tours and his openness to show people what it looks like is kind of the best that we can do as far as explaining to people this is why, and having that conversation. But I think it's really important that we use the properly registered products on label because the risk there for our industry as a whole is just too high for us not to do it. Those are great questions. I see 5 minutes left. Dr. Ritchie, I'm going to turn it back over to you to finish up and talk about the next webinar you have coming up. Please feel free to contact me if you guys need anything. But I really appreciate your time today, and thank you for your great questions and for staying engaged.
Thank you very much, Jesse. I'm going to spare everyone the video so they don't have to look at me. I really appreciate that. There's so much to be learned and from you, and the importance of water. I mean, it's pretty obvious. So really appreciate it. Our next presentation is going to be, I'm really looking forward to it. It's Dr. Ryan Snyder from Grand Valley Fortifiers in Ontario, and Ryan's going to really get into the details on the prevention of coccidiosis and some of the important management metrics, et cetera, that are so critical there. So without any further ado, thank you again, Jesse and Neogen. And also we'll just flick back to our sponsors, and I really look forward to getting together and tipping a Guinness with all my friends.
Can't wait.
All the best, everybody. Take care. Bye-bye.